Good morning, everyone. I hope you've had a great weekend. I know it was beautiful this past weekend, so I hope you were able to go outdoors and just enjoy the sunshine and the warmer weather. Today, we are going to start a brand new book, which is called Because of Winn, Dixie. And we are also finished with the purple calendar, so we are going to start the yellow calendar today. So today is April 6th, so we're going to be completing what is on April 6th today. What I would like us to do, though, before we get into Chapter 1 of Because of Winn, Dixie, is in your folder, you have this Because of Winn, Dixie packet. What I would like us to do is just go over the first page together, because this tells us a little bit about the author, as well as the novel Because of Winn, Dixie, and what it's going to be about. So what I'd like you to do is go ahead and just get it out, and on the first page we're just going to read it together and learn more about the author, maybe why she wrote the book, as well as what the book's going to be about. So here we go. About the author. Kate DiCamillo was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1964. She moved with her family to Clermont, Florida when she was 5 years old for health reasons. She moved to Minneapolis, Minnesota when she was 30 years old and began working in a book warehouse. She wrote the book Because of Winn, Dixie because she was homesick for Florida. Kate DiCamillo writes both children and adult books. As she herself puts it, I like to think of myself as a storyteller. About the novel. 10-year-old India Opal Bellani, known as Opal, and her preacher father have just moved to a new town in Florida. This is where Opal connects with a mangy-looking stray dog that she decides to name Winn, Dixie. It is through her eyes and heart that we are introduced to a community of interesting characters that would otherwise be shunned or mocked. Throughout the story, Opal discovers things about herself and learns facts about the mother who abandoned her before she even got to know her. She attributes all the turn of events to befriending a scruffy dog. One would agree it's all because of Winn, Dixie. So that's a little bit about the author as well as the novel. And if you notice, while we were reading, it said that the author wrote this book because she was homesick for Florida. And if you go back to about the novel, where does it say the story is taking place? So the setting of the story would be where? Give you a little time, see if you can find it. Alright, if you read the first sentence for about the novel, it says, 10-year-old India Opal Bellani, known as Opal, and her preacher father have just moved to a new town in Florida. So you can see that the author used a little bit of her own personal background when she was writing this story. She based the story in Florida, which is where she lived for a little bit, and she was also homesick for Florida while she wrote this story. So that's just a little bit about the author, Kate DiCamillo, and as well as our characters Opal and Winn, Dixie, with this story Because of Winn, Dixie. So we're going to put this packet to the side for now. What we're going to do is get started in the book Because of Winn, Dixie. So we're going to start with Chapter 1, and there it should be on page 7. Looks like this. Alright, we'll go ahead and get started. My name is India Opal Bellani, and last summer my daddy, the preacher, sent me to the store for a box of macaroni and cheese, some white rice, and 2 tomatoes, and I came back with a dog. This is what happened. I walked into the produce section of the Winn, Dixie grocery store to pick out my 2 tomatoes, and I almost bumped right into the store manager. He was standing there all red-faced, screaming and waving his arms around. "Who let a dog in here?" he kept on shouting. "Who let a dirty dog in here?" At first, I didn't see a dog. There were just a lot of vegetables rolling around on the floor, tomatoes and onions and green peppers. and there was what seemed like a whole army of Winn Dixie employees running around, waving their arms just the same way the store manager was waving his. And then the dog came running around the corner. He was a big dog, and ugly, and he looked like he was having a real good time. His tongue was hanging out, and he was wagging his tail. He skidded to a stop and smiled right at me. I had never before in my life seen a dog smile, but that is what he did. He pulled back his lips and showed me all his teeth. Then he wagged his tail so hard that he knocked some oranges off a display, and they went rolling everywhere, mixing in with the tomatoes and onions and green peppers. The manager screamed, "Somebody grab that dog!" The dog went running over to the manager, wagging his tail and smiling. He stood up on his hind legs. You could tell that all he wanted to do was get face to face with the manager and thank him for the good time he was having in the produce department. But somehow he ended up knocking the manager over. And the manager must have been having a bad day, because lying there on the floor, right in front of everybody, he started to cry. The dog leaned over him, real concerned, and licked his face. "Please," said the manager, "somebody call the pound." "Wait a minute," I hollered. "That's my dog. Don't call the pound." All the Winn-Dixie employees turned around and looked at me, and I knew I had done something big, and maybe stupid too, but I couldn't help it. I couldn't let that dog go to the pound. "Here, boy," I said. The dog stopped licking the manager's face and put his ears up in the air and looked at me, like he was trying to remember where he knew me from. "Here, boy," I said again, and then I figured that the dog was probably just like everybody else in the world, that he would want to get called by a name, only I didn't know what his name was, so I just said the first thing that came into my head. I said, "Here, Winn-Dixie." And that dog came trotting over to me just like he had been doing it his whole life. The manager sat up and gave me a hard stare, like maybe I was making fun of him. "It's his name," I said. "Honest." We're going to pause there for a second. So she said that his name was Winn-Dixie. If you think of what we've read so far, where did she get that name from? If you need to look back in the text, you can, but think, where did she get that name from? Give you a little bit of time to think about it. Alright, I hope you have the answer. She called him Winn-Dixie because the store that she's at is the Winn-Dixie store. So she was trying to think of something really quick in her head, and the first thing that popped up to her was the store that she was in. So she named her dog after the store that she saw him in. Alright, we're going to continue on page 11, finish the chapter. The manager said, "Don't you know not to bring a dog into a grocery store?" "Yes, sir," I told him. "He got in by mistake. I'm sorry. It won't happen again." "Come on, Winn-Dixie," I said to the dog. I started walking, and he followed along behind me as I went out of the produce department and down the cereal aisle and past all the cashiers and out the door. Once we were safe outside, I checked him over real careful, and he didn't look that good. He was big, but skinny. You could see his ribs. And there were bald patches all over him, places where he didn't have any fur at all. Mostly, he looked like a big piece of old brown carpet that had been left out in the rain. "You're a mess," I told him. "I bet you don't belong to anybody." He smiled at me. He did that thing again, where he pulled back his lips and showed me his teeth. He smiled so big that it made him sneeze. It was like he was saying, I know I'm a mess. Isn't it funny? It's hard not to immediately fall in love with a dog who has a good sense of humor. Come on, I told him. Let's see what the preacher has to say about you. And the two of us, me and Winn Dixie, started walking home. So that is chapter 1 of Because of Winn Dixie. Another question I would like you to ask about this chapter is I would like you to tell me from whose point of view is the story being told. Think about it a little longer. Who is telling us this story? From whose point of view, their own perspective, who is telling us the story? So, alright, this story is being told from India Opal Bellani's perspective, or Opal is what she will be called throughout the story. So this story is all through her eyes. If you think about it, we've also read a story that is similar, probably around a month or so ago. We finished it right before you guys left. That was also from the perspective of one girl as well. And if you think about this story, I'll give you a little bit more time to think about it. What story did we also read that was from the perspective of a girl as well? If you said Sarah Plain and Tall, you're right. If you remember, Sarah Plain and Tall was from the perspective of Anna, Caleb's older sister. And it was all through her eyes of Sarah and the family and what she was feeling, as well as getting other people's perspectives when they talked to her, right? But we didn't just immediately know Caleb or Pa's perspectives. We only knew Anna's. So this story is very similar in that we're going to know Opal's perspective and the way she's thinking and different scenarios that she's going through, because it's all first person through Opal's eyes. So you'll notice that throughout the story that Opal will be the one telling us this story. Alright, in your packet, you will also see that you have a section called Vocabulary. I would like you to go ahead and open that section up, and we are going to do 2 words today, 2 vocabulary words. So this is what it looks like. We are going to do produce and the pound as our words for today. Alright. When we want to define new words, we always have 2 different ideas. One, we can use a dictionary, which is what Miss Kilgore did for one of the words. Or 2, we can go back in the text and use our context clues to decide what that word means. So our first word I'm going to do with you guys. So our first word is produce. Alright, so what I want us to do first, before we grab a dictionary, is I want us to go back in the text and see if we can find the word produce and see how it is used in the text to see if it gives us an idea. So if you look on page 11, the word produce is on there. I think on page 12, excuse me, page 9. Let's go to page 9. The word produce is on page 9. Alright. So if we think about, before I read this word, think about all the different things that Winn Dixie was knocking over, and that was the produce department. Alright, so if we read the second paragraph on page 9, pull my book back a little bit. So we're going to start right here. Alright, and we're going to get to the word produce and see if we can decide what that word means. Page 9. The dog went running over to the manager, wagging his tail and smiling. He stood up on his hind legs. You could tell that all he wanted to do was get face to face with the manager and thank him for the good time he was having in the produce department. But somehow he ended up knocking the manager over. Alright, so it said he was having a good time in the produce department, but maybe if we go back and think of the different things, he knocked over oranges, tomatoes, onions, and green peppers, and those were all in the produce department. So what do you think the term produce means? give you a little bit of time to think about it before we go over the answer together. So think about it. Produce department, he knocked over oranges, tomatoes, green peppers. So what do you think the word produce means? Give you just a few more seconds. Alright, the term produce means farm-produced crops or fruits and vegetables. So these are different examples of produce. Would be the oranges, the tomatoes, the green peppers, corn, apples, strawberries, any fruits or vegetables you would find in a produce section. So think if you've ever been to Walmart with your mom or dad, grandma and grandpa, or Kroger or Aldi. If you've ever had to go grocery shopping, you'll notice that all of the produce, the fruits and vegetables, are generally in the same area together. So that would be the produce department of the grocery store that you would go to. So that is the word produce. If you would like, you can pause the video right now that you have the definition of produce right in front of you, and that way you can write it down in your packet, because you need to fill out produce and the pound. So that is the term produce. What I would like you to do is see if you can define the pound yourself. Alright, so that is your goal today, to be able to define the word pound yourself. And go back in the text, see if you can find that word again in chapter 1. And I know those context clues will be able to help you figure out what that word means. Also, feel free to use a dictionary, or if you have personal background knowledge, maybe you've heard the word pound before in a movie, or just in your life experiences. Maybe you've discussed it with your parents or friends. Maybe you've discussed it in school. If you have that background knowledge, feel free to use that as well to define the term pound. Alright, so you only have one more word to work on for your vocabulary. An extra activity that you can do today is when I was reading the first chapter and trying to plan my week out, I was thinking they did a really good job describing Winn-Dixie in the story. So I was thinking, what if we ourselves came up with a picture of Winn-Dixie? So after you're finished defining the word pound, I would love it if you guys drew Winn-Dixie. So remember, I said he had pointy ears, his fur was a little patchy as well as a little messy, so maybe it was tangled. And they even have a picture of a dog in the front, so you could use this to help you draw Winn-Dixie, or if you want to be creative and come up with your own dog, that would be excellent. And it also said in the text that Opal had come up with the name because it was the word Winn-Dixie, the general store, was the first thing that she came up with. So what I would like you to do is in the comments below, I would love to hear if you were Opal and you found Winn-Dixie in the store, would you have named him Winn-Dixie, or would you have named him something different, and why or why not? So if you were Opal and they said, this is your dog, and you said, yeah, and then you knew, oh, I have to give him a name, what would you name him? Would you have still named him Winn-Dixie, or would you have named him something else? So I would love to know that. If you'd feel free to put that in the comments section. And also, if you drew a picture of Winn-Dixie, I would love to see that as well. So if you could post a picture of your drawing of Winn-Dixie in the comments as well, I would love to see it. That is all I have for reading today. So just remember to identify the word the pound, and then feel free to draw a picture of Winn-Dixie and explain to me if you would have named him Winn-Dixie or not. Alright, you guys enjoy the rest of your day.